Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Helen. I'll be moderating this webinar, and I'm very excited to have with me once again Sujit Singh, our Kiva COO.
Hello, everybody.
Before we get started, I'd like to mention that if at any point in time you have trouble hearing us, please let us know using the chat feature and GoToWebinar. We'll be sure to assist you. Also, we reserve a few minutes at the end of the webinar for questions. Please feel free to answer your questions as you think of them. And if you can just help us out by just completing the survey at the end, we'll really appreciate it. That helps us fine-tune our webinars as well. So to start out this discussion on how social media affects demand, I'd like to share a popular viral video.
Charlie bit me. Charlie bit me. And that really hurt, Charlie, and it's still hurting.
So this video is an all-time viral video that has been viewed by millions of people on YouTube. Perhaps when you think of things going viral on social media, you often turn your attention to more funny videos like this. While a lot of social media posts go viral due to their sense of humor, as supply chain professionals, there's more to the story for us. The question here is, how can social media affect your demand planning? Or another way to look at it, how can you stay ahead of the conversations that happen on social media so that you can be better prepared? So today we're going to look at how to create an outside-in approach using social listening tools. And as usual, since we have some people here that are not familiar with Arqiva, I'm just going to give a quick introduction. So we're a team of data optimization scientists and supply chain consultants providing easy to configure supply chain software solutions that empower manufacturers to improve an existing planning processes. And at Arqiva, we have a full suite supply chain S&OP suite, and what it does is it creates a harmonized S&OP process by providing a centralized repository for proactive demand planning, optimized inventory management, continuous capacity planning, demand and supply synergy, which in turn enhances your overall visibility using reports and dashboards. So we have a full planning suite, and today we're going to be sharing one of our solutions, and that's the Arqiva Sentiment Analysis tool, which essentially helps you monitor your customer interaction in real time. And we have some really cool examples to show as well. So I'm very excited about that. Now let's take a look at the webinar overview. So what are we going to discuss today? So some of the things that we're hoping to cover today is, the concept of having an outside-in demand plan and what's that really about. And then we'll take a step back and look at the history of supply chain planning. And then we'll also dive into the evolutions in demand planning. We've come a long way since we've been playing this demand planning game. And then we're going to look at reducing forecast error. So how do you go about doing that? How does this all play into that concept, right? And then we're going to look at, how consumer demand is insatiable, essentially, and how the internet effects has changed everything. The internet has made things very different now than what it used to be. And then we're going to dive into the solution part of things. We'll look at the types of sentiment data, how you can analyze structured versus unstructured data, because as sentiment data turns to be more unstructured. And this is all done using natural language processing. So we're going to talk about that as well. So just to start off this discussion, I wanted to start with this quick question. What is an outside-in approach to demand planning? So that was the topic, so I felt it was essential to just cover that for a little bit. At a basic level, demand planning involves estimating demand by generating forecasts. Often in a more traditional approach, these forecasts are generated using historical data or data provided internally. With an outside-in approach, you include data from real-time or near real-time market signals that help you gauge where the market is headed. Now, in order for you to create an outside-in approach to demand planning, there's a need for a network of data sources across the entire network. We'll be discussing this using our sentiment analysis tool in a little bit more detail. So we're going to dive into one of those sources that help you create that data network. Creating an outside-in approach also creates a better inventory management process, end-to-end visibility, and most importantly, since the customer is king, it's exciting to know that this type of approach also enhances the overall customer experience. And now we're going to start off. I thought it was essential. So Suji, why don't you talk about a little bit about the history of demand planning?
Yes, thank you, Helen. So, history, we will not get into a whole lot of history. Let's just say that we have been at it for a while when it comes to supply chain planning. As a field, I'm sure while we were doing things along these lines for a long time, as a field, it really got started in 1980s. And by mid-1990s, it was definitely mainstream. Many companies were doing supply chain planning. Many companies were providing supply chain planning software solutions in the 80s, and certainly by mid-90s, there were a large number of them. Yet, it remains, because it's dealing with future, it remains an evolving field. I think it will always remain an evolving field because future is uncertain, it's inherently unknown, and there is a certain amount of guesswork, and new techniques will always come out. And so in that sense, demand planning and forecasting, which is a subset of supply chain planning, is no exception. When we think of demand planning, we have evolved in these last few years or decades. Early on, it started with things like time series based forecasting, where we looked at trends in the historical data and projected it out into the future. Some companies dabbled in this idea of causal forecasting, where we looked at outside factors that affected our forecast, for example, the GDP, the oil prices, those types of things. We dabbled with getting collaborative input from users. So if a salesperson who is visiting the customer, he or she might have information that can enhance the forecast. Well, let's get their input. We started doing things like demand sensing, where we would get into point of sale data and try to use that to project where the marketplace was going. In some cases, that would be other data, such as the open orders data. Then, as part of demand planning, we kind of changed our tactic, and instead of just trying to predict where we were going, we started shaping the demand by doing, certain shaping tactics, promotions, events, things like of that nature that shaped the demand, that generated extra demand. And lately, we also learned and have incorporated as a group or as a community this idea of triangulation, where we have understood that none of these techniques are perfect, and therefore we triangulate using more than one technique to get to the best forecast. Now, all of these examples in the last, let's say, 3 decades are based on structured data. And when I say structured data, I mean numbers. So a lot of that has been based on taking the numbers and doing something with it. Now, if we take the essential aim of that for demand planning process and say we are doing all this to reduce the forecast error to better project out into the future, well, that unfortunately remains a work in progress. If you look at different studies, anywhere from 60 to 80% is what is reported as forecast error 1 month out in monthly buckets, which is obviously not great. It's better than nothing, but it's not great. And if you are looking at smaller periods, so if you go from months to weeks or weeks to days, the error increases significantly. And really, if you want to tie the forecast to execution, you need to go towards smaller periods. And these higher errors at the smaller periods really creates a problem for us. So what do we have to think about how we improve that forecast or reduce that forecast error. Now, simultaneously with all this, the customers are getting more demanding, And customers are in essence asking for more. This is definitely the age where no one wants to wait for anything. If you have a smartphone and the screen cracks, certainly some time ago, all of us would look at getting it repaired, dropping it at the shop, maybe picking it up a week later. That weeks became 3 days, it became a day, and very often these days you would see no one wants to wait at all. They would rather just go and get the new phone. So this is the age of more, this is the age of now. Different surveys have reported that up to 50% of customers are willing to pay extra to get same-day shipments. And if you are, we did a quick survey, so I'm within our office, 90% of our folks use Amazon Prime. If that is any indication, that gives you a sense of how much this idea of getting quick shipments is appealing to people. In fact, there was some study done that by 2020, Amazon Prime, which basically is a way to get quick shipments, among other things for sure, will add $18 billion to the company top line. So that is a clear signal that customers are getting more demanding. The internet has obviously played a big role in this. There's the footprint of the internet is increasing, has increased rapidly. As of recently, I was looking at a survey from a company called internetworldstats.com, and they were reporting that across the world, 50% of the world population is now on the internet. And in North America, the number is much higher, it's closer to 90%. I would imagine that this number would be same in developed parts of the world. So let's just say internet use is very high and it's increasing. And there are a couple of things that come with this. Number one is that there's a long tail effect. That's a whole separate topic in itself, but long tail effect allows us to think in terms of a customer finding the exact product that they want by searching for it over the web. They also are able to find the exact service spec that they want. So if there are 5 providers providing a particular product and one of them offers the next day delivery, a customer through the power of internet is able to find that product through that supplier. So that is the internet effect that allows a customer to get or consumer to get exactly what they want. And then it also enables them to provide very direct feedback. It can come in form of comments, reviews, tweets, etc. And certainly as a consumer, I can say for myself, and I think I've done an informal survey, a lot of us really rely on these informal feedback mechanisms to make our decisions about what to buy. Now this process creates a treasure trove of unstructured data. When I say unstructured, what I mean is things like comments and so on, which are obviously not numbers and therefore a little bit difficult to analyze. So we call this unstructured data. More on that in a little bit. So this internet effect is very strong, and as an example of that, I thought it'll be fun to look at this video. Now just a little context of this. This is comedian John Oliver, and in this video he was exhorting his watchers, followers, audience, whatever, to go to the FCC website and provide their commentary in opposition to the cancellation or change, let's say, in the net neutrality rules that were being proposed. So this happened in May of 2017, and let me just play the video and then we'll talk some more.
We need you to get out there and for once in your lives, focus your indiscriminate rage in a useful direction. Seize your moments, my lovely trolls. Turn on Caps Lock and fly your pretty.
So as you can see, a very passionate push to go on that website and provide the input, to the FCC folks as to how the people felt. Now, guess what? I saw this news story only 2 weeks ago, and the real reason I saw it was that someone initially thought that this was a result of hacking. What was the result of hacking? Well, right after this very clear message from John Oliver, there was a 3,000+% spike in traffic on FCC, and the whole site was quickly overwhelmed. They brought it down, and the first reaction was that some hackers were at play. And then, of course, after a lot of detailed study, they found out that there were no hackers really. It was John Oliver's fans who were basically following up to his message. So if we try to analyze what happened, in essence, through his energetic delivery, he created a sentiment. I suppose there were folks who were already opposed the change that was being suggested, but his discussion really pushed people towards having the enough power behind that sentiment to go and act on it. Well, the other fact is that he has a lot of followers. On last check, 20+ million followers, and net result, the whole FCC website had to go through a little crash. So there is a power in this sentiment creation, and the fact that internet makes it so easy to act on it. And that was what we were trying to describe as the internet effect. Now, when we talk about this sentiment as generated by John Oliver's monologue there, there are two distinct types. When we go to a website and when we are providing a little like or clicking on 4 stars or 5 stars, that type of sentiment data is what you would call structured. Other ways of getting that structured data would be surveys and so on. On the other hand, a lot of it is unstructured, whether someone goes in on a tweet, whether a comment, whether a blog post, whether a video, a meme. All these are unstructured ways of providing that same data, sentiment related data. And as you would imagine, it's not always easy to deal with unstructured data. In fact, data scientists, this field has existed for a while now, they just love structured data. They know exactly what to do with it. The statistics around it is pretty evolved, and they can take these numbers and make a lot of sense out of them by crunching them through the statistical algorithms. But when it comes to unstructured data, it is not always clear as to what they would do. So here are some examples of things we captured off the tweetverse, if you will. Someone is saying, I loved it. Someone is saying something smelled amazing. Someone is saying, I absolutely love it. By contrast, someone is saying in a tweet, what a waste of time. Can I get my time back? These are examples of unstructured data. And, data scientists don't really know what to do with it. Now, if only one had a way of converting this unstructured data into structured data, so into some numbers, into some things that we crunch through these statistical algorithms. One can only imagine the data scientists who like to pore over these numbers, who like to make sense out of these numbers, what would they do? Well, it is my hypothesis that they would actually go party. Why so? Because the unstructured data is way more in volume compared to the structured data, and I think the types of statistical inference they would be able to draw from this unstructured data once it has been turned to some structure will really advance their theory quite a bit forward, their hypothesis quite a bit forward. So while it's maybe difficult for some of us to imagine data scientists partying, I think they would party all night long. All right, so let's think about how we can do this, or is it even possible? Well, there is a field called natural language processing. The idea is very simple. Take the natural words used by the community and try to put it through some program so that you can give it some structure. So there are many tools available to do this. These techniques can be used to analyze all kinds of unstructured data, whether it's a comment, whether it's a tweet, whether it's a Facebook post. And based on this analysis of the language and use of certain words and phrases and so on, you can assign certain sentiment scores to indicate whether the particular message is a positive message, whether it's a negative message, whether it's a neutral message. And while these techniques are nowhere near perfection, they are advanced enough that they provide enough structure to make certain predictions. Now, at Arqiva, we use these techniques. We are actually using a particular engine from Microsoft. It's called Microsoft Azure Text Analytics. And this particular tool, while similar to other NLP tools, assigns the scores in a very particular way. It takes any text, it processes it, and it puts a score of 0 to 1, and we call it the sentiment score. And the idea is that positive text, is closer to 1, negative text is closer to 0. So with that type of a toolkit, we take our customers' data and process it through the engine to get some scores. In fact, Helen, don't you have an example here of what we did around Super Bowl?
Yeah, actually I do, Sujit, and it's funny that you mentioned data scientists partying, because I think we have some party folks here, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
So certainly as a Philadelphia-based company, we were excited that the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl, yay, and we wanted to celebrate in a big way, so we got the idea that, hey, why not track fan sentiment levels or excitement levels. And then to make things more exciting, we gave away a free t-shirt whenever the Eagles were in the lead. So sorry, not so sorry to the Patriots fans. I know, Suji, you're one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially for this campaign, we tracked different Eagles and Patriots hashtags, and we measured the sentiment scores for the different tweets using our sentiment analysis tool. And as you can see here, here are some examples of the hashtags that we tracked, and we used that Super Bowl Excitement Challenge hashtag as well. And this is an example of the dashboard that we created, which you can essentially create with the sentiment analysis tool. So this could be your own data with your own keywords, but this is what we did for the Super Bowl. So you can see from this dashboard, you can see that the Eagles had the lead in tweet counts. The Patriots, however, seem to have more people that were supercharged up according to our excitement meter. And the top tweet for the Eagles had the highest positive sentiment score, which you can tell sounds very positive because it looks like the person believed that the Eagles was going to win, and they actually won. So maybe this person could have seen into the future, Sujit. That may have saved you some pain there.
Sure.
So Sujit, now we talked about it in how we use something for a more fun way, but I think what a lot of supply chain professionals suffer, or I want to say suffer, but the real challenge is that how do you make the connection between this, social media is fun, it's engaging, there are lots of people out on social media tweeting, posting things. How do you connect that to demand planning?
Yeah, let's talk about that. I must say, as a Patriot fan, it was a double ouch. We lost the excitement challenge, and then we lost the big game as well. Right, so in the supply chain world, there can be some very similarly exciting examples. Let's try to talk through some of them. Let's begin at the base level, though. At the very basic level, since we are able to convert the text, the unstructured data, to a sentiment score, a very simple thing to do is to monitor the trend of the sentiment score over time. So if a million users tweet about a particular product and everyone has a score, let's say the average score is 0.6, well, you can add that up, it comes to 600,000. And if you then track that on day 1 versus day 2, or week 1 versus week 2, it gives you a sense of the trend of that sum of sentiment score. And the thing that you're watching out for there is any significant turn in direction. So if your average is basically 600,000, and on a particular day it's 550,000, and the next day it's 650,000, really it doesn't matter. But let's say on a particular day it turns and goes to 2 million. Well, guess what? Now you potentially are going to see a significant increase in demand because your sentiment score has turned significantly positive. So that idea can be applied and brought back into supply chain. Supply chain professionals can take that idea, take that sentiment score, and use that to figure out, to sense, if you will, that as long as the overall sentiment is turning positive in a sustained and a significant way, we can make a conclusion, draw a conclusion that demand would be increasing very soon. If on the other hand, if the overall sentiment is turning negative in a sustained as well as in a significant way, we can take the conclusion that demand could be decreasing very soon. Both become then action items for the supply chain professionals. Now, when we talk about these types of texts, if I if I were to make a very positive tweet and I might have a few followers versus if someone else makes it who has a lot of followers, that the two tweets are not exactly the same. So, if a particular comment, a tweet, a post is liked or forwarded or shared millions of times, that takes on its own significance, a different level altogether. So if the poster has millions of followers, what does that happen? Well, we saw in John Oliver's case discussed earlier, that meant crashing the FCC website. So it's really not enough to just look at the sum of the sentiment score. We should combine the sentiment score with the structured data that is already available. So if you look at the world of the unstructured data out there, very often with tweets, with comments, there's a way to like, there's a way to share, there's certainly a way to measure the number of followers that are that follow that person who is making that particular comment or tweet. And so if we combine the score with the like count, the share count, and the follower count, it gives us a sense of something a lot measurable and something that is a lot more statistically significant. So if we combine that, we can use that as an example to then drive supply chain decisions. Now, when these numbers take the turn towards very high numbers, that's something in this social media world we call as going viral. And when you are in that stage of the game, when you are going viral with certain steady products, your historical demand patterns do not really apply, and you have to think differently when it comes to prediction in that particular time phase. So as an example, here is a picture of a celebrity, Justin Timberlake. He kind of put a blueberry and a raspberry together and called it Brassberry. This was picked up and it went viral, and a lot of people picked up on it, and then many companies took advantage of it. Actually, one of our customers, Driscoll's, who is in the berry business, tied into this as a campaign, and then they tried to take advantage of this to generate extra demand. So this type of a going viral idea can have a significant impact on steady products, and as supply chain professionals, we should tie into the data from marketing folks and tie this back into our supply chain processes. So here's a screenshot of what that might look like inside a tool like Arqiva, or if you like to do this analysis in Excel, then in Excel certainly. So here, if you look from left to right, this particular steady product is basically at a low volume of sentiment score when it is combined with the follower counts and the like counts and the share counts. But then something happens, and then towards the end of this graphic, you can see that there was a very high uptick in the overall sentiment, which is the equivalent of going viral. And that would be the time when a supply chain professional would roll up their sleeves and begin to make extra product available. So this is an example of how you would use the viral sentiment and tie it back into the supply chain. Helen, don't you have a few more examples on this from posts going viral about different products?
Yes, I do. And just to make a comment about the Brassberries, I think some people were disputing that that's actually a new thing. They claim that they've been doing this for years now. So, so essentially, my first story is about the concept of a cronut, and it's a donut and a croissant combination, which was created by a chef in New York. And once a popular food critic came to his restaurant, ate this, loved it, posted online about it, that was it. It took off, and now he has lines of people waiting every day just to get the product, and his business is there's a very high demand for it now. So this is an example of how social media can have a direct impact on demand. And in this case, it uses celebrity, but it's important to note that celebrities are not necessary. So you don't want to just monitor celebrity activity. You want to watch for your overall social score, like sentiments, likes, shares, trends, and then finally make an analysis on what's happening in the marketplace, because your products can essentially go viral without the need for celebrity. And we actually have a real example from an Arqiva product, a Kiva customer who uses our product. So that's Lush. And they make handmade cosmetics, so really cool products, by the way. But this is someone that put up a post on social media about how the Dream Cream had helped with her son's eczema, and that caused an immediate market reaction. You can see here that as of the time that I took the screenshot, about 43,000 people have shared this. So it's amazing how that happens. And on the back end of things, because we were fortunate to get this data from Lush, they saw an uptick in web traffic, and you can see that spike on April 19th, where it's almost up to 45,000. Okay, so there was a correlation between the post going viral and the uptick in the web traffic, and that Lush saw for the Dream Cream webpage, as you can see from the graph. So the question here is, what do you do with this? Okay, it's great, it's going viral, there's demand, there's people going to the page. To calculate a possible demand, in this example, I'm going to make the assumption that, let's say, this page converts at a rate of 10%. What you can do here is you do the math, and that the peak page for that day was 45,000. So you can come to the conclusion that possible minimum demand is about 4,500 units. So while this is not an exact science, it can help you get a sense of where the demand is headed, and you can better prepare. So that's a way that you can use this. And Sujit, can you share something that has to do with how this would affect product launches?
Absolutely. Yeah. Kudos to Lush for taking advantage of that data set that they generated from it. Yeah. So when we talk about using this data for product launches, the idea is very simple. Let's imagine that a company launches a particular product with some regularity. So when we say particular product, maybe I should say different versions of a particular product. Well, smartphones companies are a good example of this. They will launch a phone number 6 and then 7 and then 8. And so the question is, can we use sentiment analysis to figure out how a new version will fare compared to what happened in the last version? And now, historically, what we have seen is there's a lot of spend on these launches. There's a lot of fanfare, and companies, maybe for emotional reasons, then often overestimate the success of the new product. However, if you have access to the sentiment analysis tools, you can get help from there and try to gauge, where that particular product launch is going. So let's say if you launched a version last year, and now you're launching a new version, and you had sentiment scores from last year when you launched the previous version and sentiment scores from product that you're launching this year, you can compare the two and see what extra level of sentiment you're generating in the marketplace through all your marketing activity as it pertains to last year. So if your last year level is of sentiment is the same compared to this year, then realistically you cannot expect a very different sale volume. If on the other hand this year's sentiment is very different, whether higher or lower, then that can have a much different impact on the overall demand picture for that new launch. So comparing the sentiment score across the different versions and across the different launches can enable us to see where we are going with respect to the demand of the new launch. So it's very helpful in a new product example as well. Another example, Helen, from the supply chain world is this idea of leading indicators. So let me take a minute to explain what I mean by a leading indicator. If I, for example, am a manufacturer of carpets, I might like to see and monitor the government's published statistics on housing starts. Why so? Because when you build a house, first you put the foundation in, you build the structure, you do a lot of other things, and only towards the very end you put the carpet. And depending on where we are talking about, the gap could be as much as 3 months. So if I have some sense of how many housing starts are happening right now, I can immediately then calculate what might be the overall impact of that on carpet sales 3 months from now. So in this example, housing starts become a leading indicator for the corporate sale industry. Same way, the sentiment data can be a leading indicator for your sales. So you might see an uptick in sentiment, which might take some time to build up. It doesn't necessarily go viral right then and there. It might enough volume of shares and likes need to build up. And if that takes 3, 4, 5 days, then that can then become a leading indicator for you to act on with respect to your demand, where that is going. So if a supply chain team is in tune with the marketing team and they are tracking the sentiment data, they can use this as a leading indicator, and then they can very clearly say, this leading indicator is saying that our demand is about to hit the roof or go down, and using that leading indicator to forecast the future. Now, one caveat, probably the sentiment score is a leading indicator for the future, except near future. I doubt, although I'm sure there might be cases that disprove my doubt here, but certainly I feel that the sentiment score might be a better predictor, a better leading indicator for the near future. So let's say next 3, 4 weeks rather than next 6, 9 months. So sentiment data, if tracked properly, supply chain folks can then use it as a leading indicator to predict where the demand is going. Also, supply chain folks who are dealing with products that require support. So as an example, if I sell laptops, and those laptops I provide certain 1-800 number support on, then I need to properly staff my call center so that when people call in for support, I have the appropriate resources available. Well, if we take this sentiment analysis technique on the forums where people are entering comments about my product, I can gauge whether the sentiment is overall negative, people are liking the product, are certain parts failing more than others, are certain parts more confusing than others. In general, which way is the sentiment? What kind of things are people asking for help? And if I run the support organization and if I'm in charge of the supply chain of that support, well, in that case, I can then use the sentiment data to forecast the support needs, not just the volume, but the type of support that will be needed. And that can help enable the staffing decisions for me. Do I need to have a 24/7? Do I need to have a lean staff? Do I need to have many people? And of course, if I am the type of company that provides warranty claims, this will then allow me to help fine-tune my budget for the warranty claims based on the number of total complaints that I might be seeing, or the overall sentiment that I might be seeing with respect to the product on these forums. So here's another example for supply chain people for how they can use this in a real world example. Now, this is all well and good for companies that sell directly to consumers, but what if you are from a company that doesn't sell directly to consumers? Can this sentiment analysis help you? So for example, you make certain products that go into certain other products that then, for example, are sold by retailers to consumers. Well, in fact, you can. Where we have seen this is the best use of this is to avoid the bullwhip effect. So if you are a consumer, just to explain the bullwhip effect a little bit, if you are a consumer and the overall consumer demand has changed a little bit, by the time it traverses the extended supply chain and reaches all the way back to the manufacturers, which is in this example all the way to the right, typically the bullwhip effect says that by the time the manufacturer sees it, the change looks like a much bigger change. So the manufacturers experience a much higher increase in uncertainty based on small changes in the front end of the supply chain. Well, that means that translates into higher inventories for the manufacturers, and in essence it means higher inventories throughout the supply chain. So if I'm that type of a company, if I am not directly next to the consumer, but I'm further back in the supply chain, based on the sentiment analysis of consumers data, I can be better prepared for a spike in demand that will surely be coming my way when my retailer who is in front of me realizes that same spike in demand. So this can be very effectively used to either completely avoid, and maybe if that is too far, certainly minimize the bullwhip effect. Now, we have done a full webinar earlier on the bullwhip effect. We will be providing a link to that. Having some difficulty saying that word today, but we'll providing a link to that later on. So you can certainly look that up. All right. So we have discussed some ways where we can take this very unstructured data and take it into some amount of sentiment analysis and use it for supply chain purposes. Now this field, in general, we can say it's still in its infancy. Certainly a lot of good work is being done, but there's a lot that needs to be done still. I think, for example, there are reliable ways to analyze text, but maybe not as much to analyze a video or an image. And as you know, a lot of this unstructured data actually comes out in that form. So surely these algorithms will be enhanced. People will work towards making these better, whether it's just the text, but also the image and the video. And this will absolutely get into the mainstream of forecasting with time. And so it is my prediction that companies who invest time to learn this now will come out ahead in the future. So with that said, I think it's time to turn the corner and give this back to Helen for a summary. And I think there are some more things she would like to talk about. So Helen?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sujit. I feel like I have learned a lot through this discussion. So some of the key points here that I noted, so essentially we're in this sense of having unstructured data, structured data, and this is unstructured data is available through social media, and it's growing at a tremendous pace. So the goal here is that we want to get ahead of the curve so that we can take advantage of that. For those wondering how you can actually convert this into useful information, hopefully we've been able to share some tidbits on that, how you can connect the demand planning to something that's a bit more unstructured, like social media data. And converting this to using the sentiment score allows it to be essentially more measurable. So that's what the sentiment analysis tool does. And it's essential that we connect this with shares, likes, web traffic, so that you can make it useful during the demand planning process. So since we share some examples here, as usual, you can ask for a demo, which would be more tailored to your specific situation. So we can help you figure out certain keywords that you should be tracking, even if you're a B2B customer or a B2C customer. All you need to do is just go to our website, request for a demo, email me, and I can facilitate that. So just a few things, and if you have some questions, you can start putting them in now, but we have some webinars up on our website. As Sujit mentioned, one of the webinars that we talked about today a little bit was the bullwhip effects with B2B demand sensing. So that's up on our webinar. There's a recorded version if you want to learn more a little bit about that. And we also have another webinar coming up that's going to focus on the value of tier-based ALESH threshold. And our previous webinar talked about defining dashboard KPIs, and I think that was a really good one. We have lots of people attending. So if you want to check that out as well, just visit arqiva.com/webinars. So now we're going to open it up for questions. Feel free to enter your questions as you think of them using the GoToWebinar chat window. Now, Sujit, while we wait to get those questions in, I had a question that I noted down. So let's say I'm a B2B consumer or someone who actually manufactures for the B2B, but I don't have access to the consumer. Where do I get started? How do I start the process of utilizing the data?
Well, I think awareness is the best place to start. Hopefully anyone who watches this, has watched this webinar is now aware. The main thing that you have to think about is which NLP, the natural language processing tool that you will use. Certainly Arqiva provides one, but I'm sure there are many others out there. And where will you use it? Those are the two key questions I would ask. Which tool and where? By where, I mean, are we just talking about tweets? Are we talking about Facebook posts? Are we talking about comments on a particular website? Is it all of the above, some of the above, some combination? So selecting the appropriate NLP tool and deciding the universe in which we will do this analysis would be the very first step. The other thing is, with these days, one of the nice things in the unstructured world is this use of hashtags, which allows us to specify what it is that we want to be filtering by. And so if certain hashtags have particular meanings for it, generating that list of things that you would be doing your research on is a very good starting point.
Great, that's very helpful. So we have one question that came in, which is, what do you think are the most important corners of social media to watch and analyze the sentiment? Twitter, Facebook, or where else should we be looking at? I can start off that question. So I believe that there isn't any important area that you should focus on. I think it's just really dependent on where your target audience is located. So if you have a lot of people that interact on Facebook, then you should be checking what's happening on Facebook. If you have a lot of people that interact on Twitter, that's where you should be checking if it's Instagram. So it really depends on where you have majority of your customers interacting. So it's not a one size fits all, like maybe you should be checking just Twitter or just Facebook. I think it's really what works in your case. So do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would like to say that, this will tie this back to the earlier point about consumers are getting very demanding. No one has time really these days. People look for short comments, and there's this is not, I'm not trying to provide a plug for Twitter, but Twitter forces you to have only a certain number of characters and no more. And in that sense, it forces the reviewer, the data provider, the comment provider, tweet provider, tweeter, to kind of channel their energy in succinctly. And then on the tail end, when you do the NLP, the natural language processing, it helps the case by only asking the tool to parse, what is it now, 280 characters or whatever is the new limit from Twitter. So I would say I'm a little bit partial to that for that reason, because it really, you certainly can go on Amazon and sometimes the review can be 2 pages long. Right. And I find that I don't get as much value out of it compared to something that is shorter. So I agree with everything you said, but I would probably, if I were to absolutely force to rank it, I would put Twitter just a half step ahead of the other venues.
Okay, great. So so I don't think we have any more questions. So at this point, I want to say thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for spending some time with us, and we hope you can join us on the next webinar. Thanks, Sujit.
Thank you very much.